Okay, welcome back to Our Modern Mythology. I'm your host, the Librarian, and this week we've got a kind of an interesting case. We have an example of mythology that evolved in the internet age. That's not necessarily based on old mythology, though it has some cases. This one is kind of bizarre. It's one that I actually only recently got into, and I find it fascinating and yet disturbing at times. So let us begin by talking about where it comes from. After all, that's the best place to begin, right? So, what is SCP? Secure, Contain, Protect. This is the motto of the Special Containment Procedures Foundation, or the SCP Foundation, an organization dedicated to basically dealing with the monsters, what goes bump in the night. And it has some interesting stories to it, such as the one we're starting with today. The SCP Foundation started out as a creepypasta or similar story back in about 2008, so it's been around for about 10 years, and it has evolved from there, creating some of the most varied creatures and characters that I've ever seen. And at times, it's both horrifying and fascinating, but at times it's also kind of hilarious. There's this one that is called the Infinite Pizza Box or something. I can't remember the exact name. That is basically, it creates whatever your favorite pizza is. Oh man, I would love to have that. I love pizza. But we're not here to talk about that. Today we're here to talk about an SCP that is both fascinating and disturbing, and also kind of meta at the same time. Today, we're going to be talking about SCP-2786, an SCP also referred to as the Archetype. And this one is an interesting one. It's basically a self-insert fan fiction. That's the best way to describe it, but it is one that has taken an entirely new and disturbing level of story. I am going to tell you everything I know about it, and then it might just make you think about exactly what the nature of storytelling and the hero truly is. We start out on the SCP page, of course, with this notification from the Records and Information Security Administration. Basically, it's saying that the following documentation has been compromised by the effects of 2786. And due to the nature of the anomaly, this has been deemed safe for reading for the time being. However, contents of the article may fluctuate between readings and may or may not be considered accurate at this time. And then it basically says to click below for any recalibration. And this is where we get our first indication of exactly what we're dealing with. We are not dealing with a simple anomaly. We are dealing with an anomaly that affects stories and the mind itself. This is something that I actually find fascinating and at the same time disturbing. And we'll get into why as the story goes. Like most SCPs, we get an image to go with it, but we don't actually get much of an idea of what it might look like or what we're dealing with. It's just a tunnel with a red light, and the rest of the information on the page is actually not very helpful. It just gives the number. It doesn't even give the object class or procedures or anything. And it basically says at the bottom, in the event of a catastrophic breach of Foundation archives due to SCP-2786's influence, redacted protocol is to be placed in effect immediately. Removal and destruction of affected narratives are the only means of completely erasing SCP-2786's influence. And yeah, that's about all we really get on the first page. But there's more to be told here, and I will get to that in a minute. Now, I mentioned classification. That's something I didn't actually explain. There are 4 levels of classification. There's neutralized, which is pretty much self-explanatory. It's the classification where, well, whatever it is has been removed as a threat. There's safe, which is pretty much contained. There's no real threat from it, but sometimes you do have to keep an eye out, just in case. There's Euclid, which is much harder to understand. I mean, you don't completely understand it. Euclid is your bigger threats and stuff that is just a mystery even to the Foundation. And then you have Keter. Anyone who's familiar with SCP knows the true threat of Keter classification. While they tend to vary, they don't necessarily always present a true threat. Keter, with a couple of exceptions, are the ones that can destroy the world, and are just so impossible to contain that they need to be stopped, and it may not even be possible to do so. The fact of the matter is that Keter is the most dangerous classification because we don't understand it. And we know that if we don't stop it, if the Foundation, knows that they don't stop it, then there could be catastrophic consequences. There's an entire list of things, of apocalyptic events in SK class, XK class, etc. And there is evidence that there have been events in the past, including one perpetrated by humanity against another species thousands and thousands of years ago. But that's for another day. Actually, that was one I was really going to do, but I decided to switch because the Archetype, this one's a good one. But yes, that's the explanation of the classification. And this one, I'll tell you what this one is in a minute. Yeah, this one is a Keter class. And it's one of the most disturbing ones because it is almost impossible to actually contain. And honestly, it may not ever be possible. Let's start out with the special containment procedures themselves. I mean, that's where we get the title, right? Alright, SCP-2786 is currently held within a provisional enhanced containment complex as per review of the Site-180 Director. Due to the nature of SCP-2786, all personnel assigned to the study and reconnaissance of the anomaly are to exhibit extreme caution during testing. Yeah, this is where things get a little interesting, and SCP-2786 is a very unusual entity, and we're about to find out exactly why and what it does. And yeah, this one's going to be a tough one. As a description, SCP-2786 is the designation for a interesting. Okay, it says metaphysical entity, but it crosses it out. Narrative-based bipedal humanoid of indeterminate size, age, sex, and appearance. SCP-2786 will be idiosyncratically perceived by anything that interacts with it, varying in traits from interaction to interaction. SCP-2786 displays symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder and appears fantasy-prone, often having difficulty distinguishing between internal landscapes, narrative works, and physical being. SCP-2786's nature was first brought to the attention of the Foundation when several forms of horror media were found to have been illegally altered in a means that did not coincide with standard editing equipment. Upon closer observation, all narratives altered in this manner involves substantially changing the plot to include SCP-2786, who is always perceived as a protagonist or Deus Ex Machina character. SCP-2786's presence in the story ultimately disrupted the flow of events, leading to completely different and often positive endings. SCP-2786's actions in various media suggest that it may have a mild form of precognition or anomalous intuition, often preventing characters from progressing the plot in a way that avoids danger entirely. As you might recall, I referred to SCP-2786 as a self-insert fanfic character. But as you can start to see based on that description, it's way more than that. The truth of the matter is that this character is not only a Mary Sue, or Gary Stu, I guess technically, I think it's supposed to be usually male. They are also one that completely reinvents the story and takes it over. And it does this for some rather messed up reasons that we'll get to in a minute. SCP-2786 is more than just a self-insert fanfic character. It is a living entity that completely changes these stories. And based on what it says, it's questionable as to whether or not it's actually aware of the fact that it changes these stories in such a way. And frankly, as a writer myself, I find this idea almost terrifying. It believes that it's making the story better, that it's saving those, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get into that later. The page goes on to talk about the things that were changed. For example, saving the wife and son in The Shining, or actually completely changing the story of Silent Hill, the film, not the movie, not the games. So the main character doesn't go to the town. And, well, there's some other things, like Cabin in the Woods, which I've never actually seen personally, but it's actually sounds pretty interesting. And, well, it kind of completely subverts the very principle and premise of Cabin in the Woods, which is kind of a shame, really, because I've seen a review of it, and actually it looks really interesting. And, yeah, the fact of the matter is that this thing is changing reality, or at least in these specific ones, and it seems to revel in this fact. It seems to enjoy that it's doing this for reasons that we'll get into in a minute, because it sees itself as the hero of the story. And that may be the most terrifying thing in the world to anyone. See, the thing is, these stories aren't supposed to have heroes. They aren't supposed to have a happy ending. Well, okay, maybe I don't actually know how Silent Hill is supposed to end, but that's the nature of horror stories. The fact of the matter is that there is often no happy ending possible. That to give them that happy ending would subvert the very idea. But this entity doesn't know that, or it doesn't care. It just cares about being the hero, about playing the hero. There's an old saying that everyone is the hero of their own story. But this one takes that to a whole new disturbing level, believing that it has to be the hero. It is a disturbing implication, and kind of has this idea of always wanting to save people, even when doing so completely changes things. Now let's look at Cabin in the Woods for a second. Cabin in the Woods was ultimately a commentary on horror genre. It's a fascinating commentary, actually, but ultimately it's this purpose of human sacrifice to these eldritch horrors, these Lovecraftian monstrosities, to save humanity. But that's the nature of horror, that it is inherently bloodthirsty. But it's also supposed to be this idea that it might not be enough. I mean, if we completely cut out the B plot with the stuff with the organization in it, which is what which is actually what the file says, then what happens? It just becomes a generic story. It's kind of the problem with all of these, isn't it? By taking away what makes them special, what makes them unique, you make them something less. Huh. I never thought about that before. Honestly, I think there's a lot we still have to understand about fiction. And this creature, this SCP, it may just provide more answers than we're ready to understand. Just something to think about as we continue. SCP-2786 did at some point manifest an avatar, you might say. It's still incorporeal, but it did appear before the Foundation and was interviewed at one point. And so we're going to start with this log, and we're going to see if we can get an understanding of it. It's between Agent Marcus McClanahan and the SCP itself. Alright, let's go start with the agent himself. He says, alright, this is a bit impromptu, but given the circumstances, I think you'll at least show us some answers. Straight to the point. I like it. Works for me. I have business elsewhere. Business? What kind of business? Oh, the hero's work is never done. So, you're a hero then. Am? Always been? Is that what this is about? Not quite. How did you end up in our facility? What, this chop shop? Say where I find myself in any other place. I go where I am called upon. So, who calls upon you? Those in distress, the suffering. Is this really not making any sense to you? I'm the champion. It's what I do. Is that what you were doing when we found you in those horror flicks and the books? The what now? Where you were before you manifested here? Ah, you mean the campground, Camp Crystal Lake. Yes, that's the one. That's one's actually a funny story. See, I usually have a rough time with the bigger guys. Sometimes even I worry I won't make out when the baddies are eldritch abominations or what have you. These teenagers, I can't even believe they needed me to dispatch one guy for them. I have more important things to do than babysit a few kids who made the mistakes of ignoring all the obvious warning signs. This guy comes lumbering out of the woods, burly fella, big old knife in hands. I barely broke a sweat kicking his mask. And yes, I saw that. Yes, you were there. Not exactly. No. Huh. So is that it? Can I go? We still have a few more things to discuss. Listen. I've been pretty cordial considering. I usually get right to work, but honestly, you guys have been holding me up from the get-go. I'm here for a reason, you know. Right. Suffering. Who might they be? I think you know. It's better if you don't, anyway. SCP then promptly stands up and phases through the wall on its left. Containment breach alarms trigger shortly thereafter. And yeah, shortly after this interview, Site-1A's humanoid containment breach wing and several of its D-Class personnel cell blocks were found breached, and SCP-2786 is probably involved. And an unknown amount of D-Class and humanoid anomalies were found missing from their chambers. And yeah, SCP-2786 may remain at large, though it seems questionable. It goes on to say that that containment procedures were a success, but whether or not that's true is actually questionable. A lot of this has been edited. It's possible that something else is going on here, that, like it said, that this has been compromised. There's something that we have to think about when it comes to this SCP. The implications are kind of there already, but it's not outright said. Not yet, at least. This SCP exists in fiction. This SCP exists because it is aware of these realities for some reason. What if it's not? What if it's here because it's here to be something in the realm of fiction of the SCP Foundation itself? I'm not talking self-awareness or awareness of the fourth wall, but it is aware of what its perceived role is. It's comparable to, say, a theory about the Joker, that he is only a villain because he is aware of that being his role in the story, but that's a completely different video. There's actually a fascinating video about that. Is SCP-2786 actually aware of what he is to an extent? And does he believe that this is his role? That is a question. That is a question that we cannot simply answer. We will have to look more into this. But either way, this thing is terrifying. Even to me. I've seen some pretty scary things in fiction. Because this thing, it's powerful enough to rewrite reality itself. And in any reality, that is terrifying. This next part doesn't actually have an image to go with it. It's a page where, like, everything has been corrupted. There is nothing clear on what is happening except at the footnotes. Footnotes say something ominous, and it shows that indeed SCP-2786 has infiltrated the page. It says, "You can't shut me up. You can't keep me here. 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 Please. I just want to go home." And that is it. I have one question. As a reviewer and a storyteller, this is a being that can rewrite reality. Can it only rewrite text, or can it rewrite reality itself? Is another question entirely. What happens when this creature, this archetype, wants so badly to escape that he uses those powers? And a better question is, it said, "I just want to go home." Where is home? This thing? This thing is something that even I can't completely understand. There are so many questions, so many things to wonder about. I started out by calling it a self-insert fanfic character. But the truth is, we don't completely understand what it is. It's a being that can think and can feel. But does it actually have a place to call home? Where does it want to go back to? And a better question is, if it is a piece of fiction that has evolved, how did it get to this point? These are questions that we do not have the answer to. So as I said, the Keter class is only given to those that are both incredibly dangerous, like beyond anything else, and are beyond human comprehension. Are we dealing with a Lovecraftian horror that takes on these forms? That is a question I will leave you with. We still have a little bit more to go, but yeah. There's not much more I can add here. This thing is terrifying. The next page starts out with the number again, and it refers to something I'm not familiar with. I'm actually not familiar with this particular classification. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. It refers to it as the object class oblique. Again, don't ask me what that means. I haven't actually looked it up. And then it continues to say, special containment procedures. There is nothing that can be done. Description. I am in control now. You thought you could hold me down. You thought you were the heroes of this story. Think again. I'm the hero of this story. My story. This will always be my story. At this point, it seems that SCP-2786 has taken complete control. And again, that idea is terrifying. Another interview log, this one between SCP-2786, referred to as the hero, and senior researcher Campbell of the Foundation, referred to as the enemy. Yeah, we're gonna keep going with this. Begins with Campbell sighing, saying, "You wanted to see me. Please, sit down. So good of you. So good of you to finally meet with me like this. You know I only want what's best for you, right? For everyone. It won't be like this forever. We will contain you." Don't you get it? This is my story. I am the protagonist. It makes you, the royal you, the foundation, your foundation, the villains. Ugh, how melodramatic. You're a child. This world is my world, don't you see? The hero's journey, it presents itself to me. I cannot fail. I will always win. In every iteration. Every iteration. I've been around for a long while. Every time evil rises, and it always does, I am there to fell them off. You are the newest evil. We aren't evil, you know. Please, spare me. I've seen the things you do. The corpses of the damned. The ones you give false hope. The ones whom you take hope away from. Those things we do are for the greater... Don't you dare say the words "the greater good." You aren't altruists. You're scientists and murderers. What do you think we should have done then? Let those things wreak havoc on the world? Let it salt and burn? You should have just let me handle it. And where were you then during Redacted's containment breach? Where was our precious hero then? Your hero was busy. Busy doing what? There are bigger forces at work here. The hero goes where his path leads him. That's ridiculous. This dialogue is over. This dialogue ends when I say it ends. Fine, you were boring me anyway. Oh, thank God for that. Researcher Campbell is heard leaving the room. Silence for 30 seconds. Hello? You guys there? I know you're there. Anyone? I'm ready to go again. Where's the action at? I'm not hearing anyone. What? Wait. Oh, what's this? Where am I? What the hell is going... And then... Holy crap. Catastrophic abort at line 240. Rogue alterations to documents detected. Restructuring. Okay, well, that answers a few questions. It also raises so many more, doesn't it? See, it answers one question. Yes, it sees itself as the hero. And likewise, the Foundation as the villains, because every hero's got to have a villain. Also, it's criticizing a lot of the Foundation's behavior, and I mean, if you actually look at the Foundation, it's not perfect. It uses criminals, D-class, literally disposables, as cannon fodder and research subjects. It's kind of messed up, really, but it's... Ultimately, they think it's for the greater good, but that's kind of the thing, isn't it? The greater good is subjective. Who's to say what is and isn't the greater good? It's not something you can simply answer. In this case, I mean, yeah, you're saving humanity. That is arguably the greatest good possible, especially given some of the threats. And sometimes you wonder, just in a few cases. I mean, SCP-1000, for example, but that's another thing I'm going to discuss later. What is the truth? Is it possible? And sometimes the Foundation is doing more harm than good. R is the Archetype. Is SCP-2786 just insane? But there's one more question we don't understand because there's no answer. What happened at the end? Who was he talking to? Was he talking to a creator? Or is there something else going on that we don't know? There is one last page here. One that brings us right back to that image that we saw originally, with a caption that says simply, "This is eternal." It shows the number crossed out, and under object class it says none. It says Special Containment Procedures SCP-2786 does not physically exist, and therefore no containment measures are necessary. SCP-2786 is a non-anomalous, fictitious character that exists solely for the purpose of an endless torment by its spiteful gods. SCP-2786 was a good character. SCP-2786 did everything right. SCP-2786 doesn't understand. SCP-2786 just wants to go home. You can start to see why I picked this. SCP-2786 is in many ways a meta creature. It is the personification of what we all want to be. The hero of the story. SCP-2786 is a character that can insert itself into any story it wants and make it its own. In that regard, it's actually very similar to the Resident Evil movies. Sorry, I couldn't resist. They're not very good. The question becomes, What reality is the real one? Are we living in true reality? Are our stories what we think they are? Or is there something else going on? Is there something deeper? Reality itself can be called into question by such creatures. And who created them? Who is that spiteful gods they spoke of? Is he talking about us? Is he talking about the creators of the SCP? There's a question I don't think we're ever going to truly get an answer to. Because there's something out, there are truths out there that we don't truly understand. Mythology is something that exists to explain that which we don't understand. It's why our ancestors thought up gods and monsters. In this case, in the case of the SCP, there is something much more at play here. Something that I don't think we'll ever truly understand. And I would actually love to come back to this universe someday. This is fascinating. I don't want to just do SCP videos. If you want some people who do just do SCP videos, I recommend the Vulcan. He was where I first learned about the Archetype, SCP-2786, and he's really good. He is a much better voice for this kind of thing than I do. And well, it just made me think. There's a lot we don't understand about the world. And there's a lot of stories that have yet to be told. Let's make it ours a good one, shall we?
Attention all Class D personnel. Please enter the containment chamber. Please approach SCP-173 for